Hi and welcome to the Beer Temple. I am Chris Quinn, and today we've got a lineup of beers from I've already lost Max's interest, so off to a great start. Got a lineup of beers from my home state of Pennsylvania. Had Troegs beers on once before, I believe. I could be wrong. You can always go to craftbeertemple.com and do a search for Troegs and see. I'll probably be doing that myself after I'm done here. But I did the Flying Mouflon. I did a small little vertical. Actually, people ask me a lot about verticals. I think that was the first vertical I've ever done, was the Flying Mouflon from Troegs. But now I have 3 of their kind of regular year-round offerings. Pretty nice little selection of what these guys do that I thought I would taste through. It's been a little while since I had 3 of the same brewery on, so I thought it would be fun. And this is a beer that's pretty well regarded on the East Coast and I guess around the country. They've certainly won their fair share of medals, which isn't everything, but it is a sign that, you know, in blind competitions that they are being chosen amongst other beers for their style. Yeah, they're out of Hershey, Pennsylvania. Troegs, 2 brothers, the Troegs brothers. I did look into it. There is a slight and distant relationship to Troegs, the Burninator, but more on that later. The Troegs brothers, I guess Troegs is a derivative of that. I don't really know too much about it. I went into it in the Flying Mouflon show, I believe. One brother started out in Boulder, Colorado. Big brewing hub, especially historically. That's where I believe Charlie Papazian, you know, the kind of son of the god of home brewing. That's a weird little Iron Chef reference there. Basically, you know, he started out at Boulder teaching homebrew classes, and it's always kind of been a little hub there. Colorado in general, big craft brew scene there still to this day, especially to this day. And moved back to PA, where they're from, on the East Coast, and the brother does more of the marketing and the operations side, and then the brewing is done by the other brother. I don't know their names, but, you know, very similar to how a lot of these other craft breweries started. You know, they are family businesses, which is cool. So the 3 beers I have is their Doppelbock, the newish IPA that they've put out, kind of a boozy, almost like a West Coast amped level or Midwest level, bordering on the double IPA, and then a coffee stout. And I'll kind of go through them in this way. Figured I would start with the Troegs, the Doppelbock. Highly awarded beer here. I think it won at the latest World Beer Cup. It was awarded a medal, and last year at the Great American Beer Fest it was also awarded a level. This has been a stalwart, really one of the first big American Doppelbocks that I can remember hearing a lot of accolades for. You know, really one of their, I don't know if it's their flagship beers, but it's one of the ones that they're most known for. The Doppelbock style, from Germany. It is a lager. It is a strong lager, and it has monastic backgrounds. The first Doppelbock that was ever brewed was done by the Paulaner Monastery, and it's called Salvator or Salvator, and it is basically, you know, named after their savior, because during Lent they were only allowed to drink. They would fast basically, and it was their liquid bread, and I think quite literally kept them alive at times. And after that, there's kind of been a tradition that the ATOR, the Ator, is kind of a sign that you are drinking a Doppelbock. It's not absolute. There are Doppelbocks that don't end in Ator, but that's why you have the Troegs. And I always like when people do that. They get kind of creative with that. So it's going to be a big, clean, malt-driven lager. Also, I've done a show on that. Please feel free to take a look. I had 3 kind of classic German Doppelbocks. So here is the American style. Absolutely lovely color, really striking red. Brilliant ruby color with like kind of black highlights to it, kind of fiery looking, and very clear, pardon me, and a good amount of head, just a little bit of head there that kind of sticks around. And what I want to get here is real depth of malt. I'm not really typically going to look for hops. If I get maybe a hint of some kind of earthy hops, that's okay. But really, this is a malt-driven beer. So what I'm getting here is definitely some sweet caramel and toffee notes. I'm not getting as much like kind of bready or toasty. It's much more on the kind of drippy, nectary malt side of things. I say drippy, nectary fruit flavors from yeast or especially hops, but this case it's like a sweet caramel, and it's really nice. I might be getting a hint of a savory quality too. Restrained fruitiness, almost like some cherry or strawberry in here. But just a note of it, you really don't want to get too much fruit, and if you do get fruit, you want it to be malt driven. Again, this style is all about the malt. You don't want to get a lot of yeast, and you don't want to get certainly a lot of hops either. Really nice. 8.2%, which is pretty standard for a Doppelbock. This beer was brewed in late or early August, so it's about 4 months old. Absolutely fine for a Doppelbock. 4 months is, I would say, considered fresh. I'd say 6 months is considered fresh, really. Nice, clean. It's got a little bit of a boozy bite to it. It's a little chewy, yet not entirely sweet. It does have kind of a little bit of a hop bite on the end, just a hint of it, and it goes well with some of that kind of caramel sweetness. You don't want it to be like you're biting into like a caramel apple, something like that. There is, again, some fruit. I got a little bit more dried fruit on the palate than I did on my nose. Maybe some dried cherries or craisins or something like that. Although not the tartness that you get in that. Maybe like a raisin, like a sweet raisin. I just want to say the word craisin. It's nice. Really good. Doesn't have that absolutely stunning depth of malt that my favorite German Doppelbocks have. Something like Celebrator or Salvator, something like that. Maximator from Augustasian are really nice. So this is a nice example of the style. I mean, obviously it won World Beer Cup, so who am I to judge? It's just preference when it comes down to the style. I like this beer. I'm going to give it a 90. Very, very solid beer. And the good thing about it is it's going to be fresh. Typically when you get this beer, less so with a Doppelbock, but some of these other styles that are traditional German styles, if you're trying to get them from the source, they can be a little old and a little oxidized. So it is always nice. Very good beer. Would really go well with some kind of heartier, maybe like a big juicy hamburger or some rich cheeses that it could kind of cut through. But you want something big, and you don't want a light salad with this. There's kind of a lot going on, a lot of sweetness. So maybe like a stew or some hearty kind of earthy flavored dishes would be good. So very nice. That's the Troegs from Troegs Brewing, their Doppelbock. I like it. Moving on. It's a beer I've only had about once, I believe. This is their Perpetual IPA. I think that it is fairly new. Let me give my glass a little rinse. We're kind of going big switches in styles here from a malt-driven style to a completely hop-driven style. This is very much an American-style IPA. They have a hop back at Troegs, which is almost like something where they use it as a filtration device. A lot of times people use a centrifuge when they're brewing. They kind of, well, not a centrifuge, but a whirlpool to just as the beer basically is spinning around, it allows all like the kind of proteins and hop gunk and yeast gunk to kind of get filtered out, and you have a much more clear beer. Another way to do it is actually to filter the beer through hops, believe it or not. That hop bed really filters out a lot of it. That's called a hop back, and it also imparts a lot of late addition hop aroma and flavor to the beer. And so they use a hop back quite a bit here. They use, I believe, nugget hops in the hop back. And in fact, in the coffee stout, they actually put coffee in the hop back. So there's going to be a lot of late hop addition, and that is going to be aromatics and flavor, like I said. And then on top of it, they're breaking out some of the big boys of the hop world, and they're going to then dry hop, when you add hops even later during fermentation. And that's when you're really purely going for big aromatics. And they're using Cascade and guess what other hop it is? I want you guys, I'll be quiet for 2 seconds and you to yourself say what hop it is. Citra. Citra, the hop of the moment. They are dry hopping with that. Huge tropical flavors coming from Citra, and the classic grapefruit from Cascade could work very well here. Pretty big beer. It's 7.5%. This is the Perpetual IPA. I don't know what perpetual stands for. My guess is that they're perpetually hopping this thing. So they're hopping it during the boil, they're hopping it afterwards as it's going through the hop back, and then they're hopping it even later as dry hopping. So pretty light colored beer, very light, like a light gold, maybe mid gold color, a little bit more of a foamy head than the Doppelbock had, than the Troegenator. Let's dive in here and see what it smells like. I mean, I would guess Citra. There's something else in there too. You're definitely getting that big kind of gummy peach flavor to it, kind of tropical. The cocktail, fruit cocktail syrup, you're getting kind of those sort of flavors. And then there is like a hint of green as well, like a really bright herbaceous green note too. It's really lovely. It's like almost smelling like if there was such a thing as a gummy peachy tree. So you go to a peach tree and it just smells kind of lush and of the outdoors, but then the actual fruit is made out of like those like gummy peachy rings. That's kind of what I'm getting here. Really nice smelling beer. I mean, this beer smells lovely. It's not a smack in the face. You definitely get it if you're getting down in there. Really nice. Not a lot of malt to speak of in the nose. Not really. Just the hops, which is fine. This beer I think is like 75 or 80 IBU. That's a lot of bitterness, but you don't really tell. There's enough malt backing in there to make it somewhat smooth. As I continue to talk, I am now getting some bitterness. Bitterness kind of is a flavor that develops on your palate over time, but it's nice. So it's very smooth mouthfeel. You can tell there's a little bit of residual sugar in here, but it goes very well with some of those tropical fruit flavors that I got in the aroma, and I'm also getting on the palate, and I kind of want some sweetness there. You think tropical fruit and you think just you want there to be a tinge of sweetness, and it has it here, which is nice. And I mean a tinge, like it's full bodied. This is not a sweet beer. Overall, this is actually a very dry beer, but there's just enough that it doesn't taste like thin and watery, which I like. A little bit more earth and wood, maybe some like mulch, just hints of it as well. I mean, the primary flavors I'm getting are definitely the ones I was getting in the aroma, but I am also getting some more continental style hops in there, some of that dusty, dirty hop, just as a hint, which I like. It rounds it out, gives it some balance as well. Very drinkable at 7.5%. I'm really not getting a lot of booze. If you absolutely hate bitter beers, this is probably not going to be one of your favorites unless you're such a hop head that you love the hop flavor. It might make up for it. But now, as I've had a couple sips, the bitterness is building a little bit. Certainly not offensive to me, though. So I like this beer as well. My lights are freaking out on me. What am I going to give this beer? That was a 90. I think this is a 91.5, 92, something like that. It's a nice beer. The one thing that I really like currently in some of these IPA slash APAs that are these newer, really highly tropical beers. I like them when they're just such big kind of double IPA bombs that are just like tongue scrapers and just so much hops that the moment you cap them, you know, it just explodes with aroma. Or on the other side, some of these lighter beers that are, you know, highly sessionable, but also incredibly dry hopped. I kind of think those are kind of the two styles of IPA that I'm very into now. Not the best, and this is somewhere in the middle. So there is room for that as well if that's the type of beer you're looking for. You know, 7.5% beer is not a low alcohol beer. You know, this is more along the lines of, you know, like the Pioneer Sculpin strengths too. But hey, man, those are good. This is not to that level to me, but in that style, especially coming from the East Coast where they're known for a much more balanced profile, this is pretty out there with the dry hopping. So that is Perpetual IPA. I'll go 91.5. Why not? Nice beer. I mean, it's hard. I'm gonna say it's hard to screw up a beer with Citra in it at this point. It's just such a hop, and you know, I'm on the bandwagon. I just think it's a great hop. Next is the Java Head. I'm going to take another sip because we are just all over the place. This is a coffee stout. For those of you who may not know, stouts are ales. And this one, I don't know if they actually add cold pressed coffee to the beer or if they simply just let ground coffee beans in the hop back and kind of almost let it brew, but with beer. I know they do that. I don't know if it's the only way they add coffee. They use local coffee roasters, which is, I mean, pretty much what it seems is the norm for these craft breweries who use coffee in their beer. They find a local roaster, which is great because you can get kind of fresh roasted product. Absolutely very dark. A black beer on the edges. I can just see some brown at the very edge, a little bit of tan. Nice kind of foamy head as well. Certainly the most carbonated of the three. Let me look at what. Oh, the brothers are Chris and John. There you go. That's the name of the brothers. 7.5%. So this is going to be the same as alcohol-wise as the Perpetual IPA. And again, this is the Java Head Stout brewed with coffee beans. And yes, I mean, you do get some caffeine with these coffee beers. So be careful. If you're drinking a whole bunch of coffee beers at night, it will wire you. You will feel the caffeine, absolutely. So very coffee forward. It's not a subtle addition of coffee. It's a little bit of a harsh coffee, almost like a green coffee as well. You know, what I like in coffee beers is when they're absolutely just chocolatey and have that very nice, almost like coffee ground smell to it. Not harsh, not bitter at all. There is a very nice, dense chocolate, kind of like chocolate cake underlying malt character to it as well. Some of that could be enhanced or even from the coffee beans. I'm not quite sure. I think the base for this was their oatmeal stout, so I think there are some oats in it as well, which you're not really going to get in the aroma, but maybe in the mouthfeel it's going to be very kind of lush and slick. But there's a little bit of like a harsh green vegetal note to it as well. I've heard when you kind of warm brew the coffee in your beer, you can get that as opposed to cold pressing the beer. Maybe that was in my head already because I knew they were using the hop back and I was expecting it. I don't think so, but we'll see. Much more of that kind of harshness in the aroma than on the mouth. I do get a little bit of it, but much more of like the chocolatey, roasty milk chocolate too. We're talking like a lighter chocolate, very soft on the mouth, hardly any bitterness at all from the roast or from the the hops. You know, roasted malts, you know, coffee, for example, is bitter. You know, a heavy roast can be bitter. And that's the same in heavy roast on malt or in the coffee they're adding. It can add bitterness from aspects of the beer that aren't necessarily hops. I think Guinness is a good example if you want to get some bitterness from roast. That said, there is hop character here. I'm not sure how many IBU are in here, but it's up there. You're definitely getting some hops. More earthy hops, you know. But I think you're probably getting some hop bitterness as well. I like this beer. Again, it's kind of a middling beer. You know, it's on the lighter side of a coffee stout. I think, you know, in America, we're so programmed that bigger is better when it comes to craft beer. And, you know, I am also, you know, that's me as well. You know, I think sometimes I get a little bit biased by that. You know, I want those Molokos like I had a couple shows ago, which are just absolute, like so luxurious and big. But those are, you know, just bigger in general. I think, well, this is 7.5. I think Moloko, I was corrected. I was saying 10%. I think they were like 8%. So, and I'm not 100% in love with the tone of the coffee in here. So, you know, good beer. I'm gonna give it an 88. That might be a little generous. Solid beer, fine beer. Doesn't really float my boat. If you're someone who loves coffee stouts and you know you want something you can buy in a 6-pack and just have, I think this is a good option. There aren't really a lot of coffee stouts that you can get like that year round. So, you know, it does fill a niche as well. So there you guys have it. Thanks so much, and thanks so much for the well-wishing for the store. The store is coming along. As soon as I have a little bit more info, I will get it to you. I know I keep saying soon, 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 but I promise you it is soon. In the meantime, also, thank you for all the comments. I've been getting a couple more recently, and very nice emails as well. Casey, I owe you an email back. I'm sorry I haven't sent you an email back. I owe you, and I'm sorry. But for now, that's about it, guys. Troegs beers. We've got their Doppelbock, their IPA, and their coffee stout. And which one am I going to drink right now? I think I'm going to go back to the Doppelbock. It's kind of a cold, rainy day here in Chicago, so I think that's appropriate. So, you know, guys, hope you enjoyed it. You know, at the end, these are really 3 nice beers that I would be happy to have anytime, pretty much. Right now, I'm especially happy to have this Doppelbock, so I am going to go because, as you know, I've got some great beer to drink, and hopefully you do too.